Got it.
What is up, 828 fam? Coach Rees here, and I'm excited to dive into this conversation. I have a friend of mine, Roscoe, and we are going to venture down another critical conversation for crucial growth, and it is Pride Month. And so we're going to go there. We're going to talk about all things pride and proud and equity and equality within the LGBTQIA plus community. We're not going to tackle everything because we don't know everything, but we're here to have the conversation and just get us started off. So Roscoe, thank you for being here. If y'all don't know Roscoe is also a consultant and a coach for 828. So definitely make sure that you reach out to them after this conversation. But I want to just dive right in because we might as well, right? We're talking about critical conversations. So let's just dive right in. Roscoe, tell me about you, your pronouns, what are they? And why is understanding and knowing people's pronouns something that's important?
Oh, yeah. So gosh, where to start? So who am I? Yeah, Cate Roscoe, educator and secretly old lady who does other things and plays frisbee and all that. And I use she and they pronouns. And actually at school, I go by Mix Roscoe. Although a lot of the kids still default to like a Miss or a Mrs. or something like that, which is fine too. Actually, when I first started teaching here in the Tacoma area, I was really adamant to go by Mrs. because it took so long for my wife and I to be legally recognized as married. So even though I know it means I, literally belong to a man, it was like, that was the way to say, like, recognize my marriage. And I also found it so fascinating that no matter how many times I forwarded back to like the people that I worked for and asked them to correct it, it never was Mrs. So I felt like that was like, not so intentional, but like, oh, your bias is showing, like, but then there was another teacher that I came to know who was non-binary and introduced themselves as mix. And so I inquired more about that. And then when I transferred schools, I think it was just probably, I don't know, the pandemic, worst time. I don't remember if this is last year or the year before, but having another conversation, another teacher asked me what, prefix I wanted to use. And so I started having this conversation with her and talking about how I started considering mix because, whole other conversation to come about like where on the gender spectrum I fell. But I liked that idea that, my gender and marital status and whatnot, that shouldn't be the first defining feature for me. But I was worried that would be a bit of appropriation because I didn't fully identify as non-binary. And, I'm having this conversation with her and I was like, and it's kind of like a F the patriarchy. And she was like, oh, that's it. You're going with it. So she changed my pronouns with the school to mix. And it was amazing to watch the response in my students. It was crazy. Like all kinds of kids, I could tell there was always like a thread of kids that there was something about their identity, right? Maybe they were kids of color, maybe they were somewhere in the LGBTQ community, but they noticed and were intentional and put that MX in front. And then also just watching what it did for the visibility with, my trans and non-binary kids and realizing like that was something, I could participate in. And it also, it did. I think that is one of the moments where I was like, started thinking about where on the spectrum I was, even at this late in the game. And there was a particular moment with my professional frisbee team where we were working on our statement. It looks a lot like an equity statement, but it really was just like our identity statement, really. And one of the things we had said is that we were a gender diverse team. And one of the, where did my brain go? Those groups we get into with people like us, where's my vocabulary? Not caucus. Oh my goodness. For like courageous conversations and stuff. You get it?
Like a coalition?
No, like,
No.
so look, oh my God, it's
Like,
totally like an equity work term.
okay.
And I don't even know where my brain
I'm
is
like
right.
friends.
Well, yeah, but you know, like when you're, so you go to like a big training and stuff, and then you break
Yes.
out into like, maybe you've got like the group of women and you've got like the group of people of color, or maybe even by more specific ethnicities, so that you can have those tough conversations and not have to worry about, say, like the damage you might do to somebody in an out group as you're starting to process
Got
stuff.
it. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I'm talking about? Where's
I
the
would
word?
say intersections. That's probably our
Yeah,
position.
no, but there's
Intersections is
actually a word for what we call these groups.
okay.
Point is,
Okay.
so we were in our different groups workshopping, and one of them brought, they didn't feel that we could say that we were gender diverse because we didn't have any like trans or non-binary players on the team. And at the time, it really bugged me, but I hadn't
Mhm.
quite put it all together right. I was like, I couldn't figure out why it bugged me so much that they said that. And then actually ended up being a co-lead on our equity work for that season. And around Pride, an article came out from another Frisbee player who's trans, and the whole piece is just amazing. But there was a moment where they said, you know, just because you don't know that we're here doesn't mean we aren't, right? That everybody does just assume. And just because that person hasn't come out to you, and there was a lot in that too, this like, you know, like when you know your kid's gay, why do we still wait for them to come out to us? Why not take that burden off them maybe? And it's definitely an open-ended question. It's not to say that that's the right or wrong thing, but it was a great question to think about. Why do we always put that burden, even if we're welcoming to them, on that other person to come out? But it just clicked with me that I was like, that's why that had bugged me so much. Because I was like, what am I, chopped liver? Like, you don't know my gender identity all the way. And they also said, like, some of us just haven't figured it out yet. And that was kind of a moment for me. And it started some other conversations with another teammate who I've known for years, who also, I would say, presents very masculine. Like, she's incredibly muscular, like real low body fat, and then just those features that happen to be like, you know, crushed and shaved head and all that. And she identifies as a cis straight woman, right? And so, and she and I have known each other, you know, forever. I was one of her college coaches. So we were talking about this and unraveling it and realizing, I think there's a component of my identity as a woman that is almost like out of defiance. Like, maybe if I had been younger in this current generation, I might actually have a completely different gender identity than I do now, because I think a lot of me was like, why can't this be woman? I mean, I broke all the rules my whole life, right? I can't tell you, I get misgendered probably every single day. And I'm not exaggerating, right? Like, you have short hair and a baseball hat. Apparently, those are genetic conditions available only on the Y chromosome. I'm like, what? And I mean, even at one point, like when I was in high school and I weighed a bit more and had slightly longer hair, but I had a very large chest, and it just befuddled me. I'm like, I'm great and glad you're not checking out my boobs, but how did you miss them? It happened last summer. I was in a skirt and a tight tank top and a baseball hat, and I got misgendered at a sporting goods store. I was like, so a lot of this is, for me, has been like, no, I'm a woman because why isn't this woman? Like, why do you keep telling me this other thing? And so I think that's like a part that I've really kind of held on to. That's, and now, you know, at 43, like, I still do identify as a woman in a lot of ways. But I also feel this component that's like, well, I don't fit any of your rules. So, you know, and I like that idea of non-binary. And I think, like, if you spread it out on a spectrum with non-binary dead in the center and, you know, women on the left, I'm like center left, somewhere on that slide. So yeah, so that's my long story. But I've really
Man,
enjoyed like having that conversation more and continuing to reflect on that and delve into that part that is out of like defiance. So
You touched on so many good things, and I want to be like, I'm so engaged here. I'm not even taking notes, so hopefully I can get this right off my brain. The number one thing that I want to refer to is the youth of today are so courageous. I mean, it's almost, there's a sense of like mind blowing that I feel, and also like it's not jealousy, it's like admiration. Like you are so you. You're just
Yeah.
so you. And you don't really even care what anybody else has to say. And I say there can be a sense of like, if I wasn't healed enough, I think like I could really feel jealous towards the kids of today because they get to just be them and they don't care what anybody else says or thinks or feels. And they're just, I'm gay, I'm bi, I'm trans, I'm this. And they just say everything without a care. And I'm like, I don't think any other, not I don't think, I just firmly, no other generation I believe has had that freedom to be
Yeah.
them. I mean, I coach high school basketball right now, AAU, and a couple of days ago, one of the players was like, "Yeah, happy Pride, coach," and I'm like, "Never." And like, and it just, it's nothing. It's
Yeah.
a new. It's nothing. It's not to make it controversial. It's not to make
Yeah.
it weird. It's just they. It's Pride. Happy Pride, coach. Yeah, boom, high five,
And
and it
I
just,
love how the straight identifying people are so much more comfortable with that. I mean, and I mean, a lot of it is these generations, right? Every generation we have pushed and pioneered and made it a safer place for the next. So, I mean, I know that's
yeah.
helpful, but it's just enjoyable to actually be a part of it. Like
Mhm.
Tuesday, I think, was National Skittles Day, and we did like a rainbow secret staff dress up day. And I had found at this gas station, Skittles finally realized that us gay folks have been making this joke forever about Skittles, and taste the rainbow. So they had Pride packaging, and they had made the Skittles gray, actually. Right. I think they're talking about like, what if you didn't have the rainbow? And then the packaging had had pink triangles, had trans flags, all kinds of neat stuff. There's a couple different versions. So I bought several of them, figuring they'd be good prizes and good for some of, my kids would appreciate that. And then it came to Skittles Day. I was like, oh, I know what to do. So I gave them out to like my most out kids. And I did have a conversation afterwards with the kids, and also they were share size. So, but I got to like make jokes that weren't inappropriate, but that like straight people would not have allowed us to have that space before, right? Where I throw a pack at a kid and I'm like, hey, did he taste the rainbow? And like make that joke in front of them. And then like when she's sharing, be like, yeah, make everyone gay. Like, and everyone got the sarcasm, like everyone thought it was funny. And just that it is so much safer. And I do, preface that with so much safer. And we know that unfortunately, depending on where you are in this country, it's still there's a lot of places that are that far cry from anything resembling safe. But it's also good to enjoy, right? That in some communities and whatnot, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna have to go buy some Skittles. But the other thing though that you said, it makes me think people don't, I feel like when it comes to this community specifically, people assume that because you have either maybe said I am gay, I'm a lesbian, trans, bi, whatever, that they assume you have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And they don't give you the grace to be able to like, because you tapped on like non-binary, woman, like sexuality, gender, like there's so much in the midst of learning who I am as a human, despite all these other things. And I know for me in my personal journey, I've come to find comfort in the intersection between, and it's not even a 50-50. It's a whatever it is that I feel like I need and the space needs between my feminine and masculine energy. And that is something that I thoroughly am like, this feels good, but it took 30 years to get here. And that's despite, the label of being a lesbian, the label of being a mask presenting lesbian, right? And I think, and for me, I also say too, like I've never celebrated Pride before because I never found pride in it. So I'm still working towards that, and that's something I think people think that you should have it all figured out if you're going to say this, and they put these, different types of expectations on us.
Yeah.
And especially kids and youth and or just people, and it doesn't give them a chance to, well, you are, so you should know. And it's like, well, nobody's forcing you to have it all together, right? And so allow people to be fluid, allow them to grow in as they continue to learn themselves. Because if things have been so suppressed for so long, right? Like when you unsuppress and you release, you gain freedom. There's a whole lot of stuff to start to explore. Like, I do like this. I don't like this. Why did I like this? I only like this because they like this, right? Like you're getting to know yourself just as much as anybody else is. And I think that, we definitely deserve that freedom to do that just as much as anybody else. So.
Sure. And you had asked originally too, like, why is it important to know somebody's pronouns and whatnot? And and I think that it's just a simple thing we can do when we say like, what's your pronouns? And we just acknowledge whatever they give us to let people tell you who they are, right? It almost goes back to that, like Maya Angelou, when they tell you who you are, believe them. So you got to let them define it, because honestly, this is something I came to kind of in the 90s as well, realizing like maybe it was early 2000s, but the only label that should matter is the one you give yourself. Like folks can put whatever they want on me or do whatever. And I've always pointed that out, right? You could identify as a lesbian and sleep only with men. That is fine, right? That is your business. It is not my job to define what your role is and what that looks like for you, and getting comfortable with it. And I mean, I recently enjoyed that conversation again. It's been a long time since I made a new friend, and even like getting to rehash kind of like some of this, these gay ideas have kind of more recently. And with this new really close friend of mine who's bisexual, but she's marrying a man, getting to have that conversation again about how, sometimes it still even feels like that, it's that outside pressure, but like people either perceive or like you're only bisexual when you're actually gay, right? When you're actually in a same gendered relationship. And having that conversation as she's helping to navigate her identity now that she's choosing to partner with one person who happens to have one gender, right? And being there and supporting her and recognizing her identity regardless of the gender of her partner right now. And yeah, I'm really kind of enjoying being in that conversation with her and being a part of it. I mean, because I enjoyed like figuring out my sexuality and I think too, maybe for me, I was not the kid that was gonna like push back and rebel with more self-destructive behavior. I didn't like my living situation with my guardian. So I was very determined to like, use school. And that started at a very young age. So my options were like be with her or go to school. So I picked up this very good habit at an early age of doing school instead of it. So I had a plan to graduate from high school early and all that. And I wasn't going to mess any of that up. But as a high schooler, we still need, you need to push boundaries. You need to break rules and do these things. And so I think for me, it was kind of this ironic benefit to grow up in the 90s where like there were safe gay spaces and it was becoming more acceptable, but there was still a little bit of a risk here and there, and it was still much quieter. So like those secret codes that we had, those ways to know who else was gay. And, you'd be walking as a kid and you'd see somebody's little rainbow sticker somewhere and it would make your whole day. Like, oh my God, you saw one. Now you don't think about it, but it would always have such a profound impact to have that little bit of visibility, or like learning about the pink triangle or this, that, the other thing. And like in my county, if you were a female athlete and your number was 33, you were gay. We had absolute lock on it. Everyone, they'd get it as a senior, and then you'd hand it down to the next ranking gay player on the team. So we really did, for guys, probably at least 7 years, that was a true statement in Humboldt County. And I still wear that number today. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That is funny. I've never heard of anybody doing that. I need to let people know that you are a stellar superstar, professional, right? Like, I don't know if they know this about you, but it's a super dope fun fact. Ultimate Frisbee player. Like, I've watched your highlights and your games, and I'm like, that is super legit. So aside from everything else, you are not just your sexuality or gender profession, like, but you actually do something super legit, which is you play at a professional level and you teach others and you give back in it. So I love that piece about you too. I definitely didn't want to end this conversation without people knowing that. But the next thing I want to ask you as we continue or start to wind down is, tell me about, I don't want to phrase this, tell me about what it's like to talk about equality and equity from a systemic racism stance, but also like addressing homophobia, transphobia, and all of that alike. You know, I think it's easy for people to say, okay, equity matters for when it comes to racism, equity matters when it comes to the wealth gap, equity matters when it comes to gender disparities, but like a lot of people struggle when it comes to this month in talking about maybe not the L, maybe not the G, maybe not the B, but a lot of times when it comes to the T, right? Like, and putting it
that's
all
what we are
together
right now, right? It's the battle for trans lives right now, for sure.
So tell me what it's
that's
like
what I was rocking
to
my
battle for that.
trans equity shirt, even like, yeah. So the lens that I've come into my equity work from was, a profound statement. Bettina Atbecker, she was the intro to femme instructor at UC Santa Cruz when I was there. And, she said something along the lines that equal isn't equal till it's everything. And I'm a math teacher now, so I've definitely co-opted it exactly like that, right? Equal isn't equal till it's everything. That's like literally how it works. And I think that's been the most successful strategy of, the white patriarchy. It's been divide and conquer. And you see it forever. The last thing that, our white elite founding fathers like that, as we're dismantling, going into Reconstruction and everything, the last thing they wanted was a coalition, right? Like a multi-class coalition of people. That would have been devastating if it was multiracial coalition by class. Sorry, that's what the issue is. If it was a multiracial coalition by class, they absolutely would have been overthrown. So, they were able to really, basically create racism as we know it and leverage that to instead create a coalition by race and get folks, and we still see it today, right, that folks are voting against their own self-interest because they bought into this lie that, like, whether they're cognitive or not, but it's like, well, at least I'm not the Black person, right? You give people just enough to buy their loyalty, and they just don't seem to understand that you're fleecing them, in every other way. And now, they did that so early on that it's really just foundational to our whole culture and just to the systems that we all run. So it's all baked in now. It just runs autonomously almost. But I tried to avoid falling into that trap because I've seen it again and again, that without us realizing it, we fall into this hierarchy idea. And we see that the people who oppress us have been so successful through oppression. And so I think without realizing it, we start mirroring it. And if we can get our lever up on somebody else, then we're a little bit closer to the top. And I mean, even in the whole concept of founding America, it was really not much different than the system they were breaking away from. Instead of one guy at the top, they put a broader group of people at the top, but doing something very similar to what was happening, with King George. I think it really wasn't much different. They just changed who was in charge and spread it out. And I also use that as kind of proof of concept of this idea that I think you get more of whatever you put in, right? Like positivity begets positivity. If you don't believe me, when was the last time you walked into a room and some jerk had just used up all the negativity and everyone had to be happy because he was such a jerk? No, it's the exact opposite, right?
Yeah.
And we already know that wealth begets wealth, like anything. So I really think, an empathy begets more empathy. If you're kind to yourself, you're not going to run out and not feel for other folks. Like, and I also saw that with power. I really think there's power over, and then there's like power to and power with.
Mm.
And I think when you share it, you actually get more. And I even turn to our founding fathers by spreading, right? They had more people in power and in wealth, and they became, our upper echelon is so much more. And even back in 1800s was so much more successful and wealthy, even as individuals, than the king they had left, proving like power begets more power. Like, let's share it, right? Power with will be power for all, I think. I mean, that's my little hokey spiel on it, but so that's kind of the lens that I'm coming at. Like, I don't think when I'm working on social justice that I'm not working on homophobia and everything else. I don't think anyone's going to be equal until we all are equal. Each fight is the same fight to me. And I also believe that because even though all of our experiences and maybe the ways in which we're impacted are different, depending on which ism you're talking about, I've yet to find one that I don't see coming from the same ultimate place, right? It's kind of all the same BS in the end. It's all coming from, the white supremacist patriarchy, and they got their mechanisms for all these things to keep each part of that word intact. So I kind of see it as, and I do this in my presentations, this idea that, if you've got this pillar of patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
if we are all trying to push it over from just our own side, have all of us pushing against ourselves and actually holding the pillar up. But if we all just got together and pushed in the same direction, we can knock it over and then start dismantling it. So I'm happy to get on board. I'll be out there with BLM, whatever. We had those mass protests in 2020. I was elated because I knew that was us starting to push together in the same direction, and I had a little hope for that. So
I think that is great. We definitely need to have more of those conversations for every reason that you just said, right? It's the all. There's no other way, because you're just going back and speaking to humanity.
And gender and sexuality, right? That crosses all racial or other boundaries, because we've got trans folks of every color and every gender, and we have folks of every gender in every color, and like it's a through line. And so no matter, like, if we're not concerned about those things, and we think we're just putting, we've got to focus on this other group, like, you're leaving part of your people behind. Like, that intersectionality, right? You don't leave that at the door. All those things show up together.
Wow.
And what's going on with trans rights right now is just, it blows me away. And that's another thing I like talking, like, a lot of folks want my opinion on it as an athlete. And what about trans players? And are you worried? I'm like, actually, no. And I play with a trans woman. Like, it's not it. And the heart of it, to me, like, if you're looking at transphobia, and transphobia has some other elements of it, but a lot of transphobia and definitely, sexuality, for me, I just think it's sexism redressed, right? Even, and I've always said that you mentioned earlier, like, what would equality look like? Well, if a guy could walk into a room in a skirt just because he likes how it feels, completely unrelated to his gender identity or his sexuality, he likes the dress, and nobody thinks twice, the way that you and I walk into a room in pants and no one notices, that's when we'll be equal. And if you look at where homophobia is most dangerous to people, it is in feminine presenting, masculine men that are too gay. Those are the ones that are at greatest risk. And then our trans folks, trans men are in danger, and trans women, it is an absolute emergency right now. Like, it's terrifying. And even that idea, this whole idea that people have it, like, oh, well, if we allow trans athletes, then men will all come over to women's sports and ruin them. And there's two flaws with that. Like, what guy is going to pretend to be a trans woman? They're not. And then if you've got, this is part of the reason with the team why we decided to go with gender diverse. We started saying humming and hawing and like, how do we basically exclude everyone but, include everyone but cis men, right? And we realized we don't even need to exclude them. Because if you are coming to a women's team as a cis man, because you think somehow that you will finally get the success and be able to dominate on that field, you're going to get your butt handed to you. You're not going to fit in on any team. Nobody's going to take you. And it's not for any reason other than like, let's put you on the same rubric with everyone else. You're going to fail across the board. And we realized, like, if there was a cis guy that actually felt that his best, most inclusive space was our, women's division pro team, why not let him try? And we will find out if that's actually true or not. And this idea that those men or trans women will come in and destroy your game is also predicated on this completely false idea that men are so much better than women in sports. And it is just baseless. And I know, go look at your Olympic sprinters. Yes, the top heat of men is faster than the top heat of women. First off, think about how much longer they've been running. And look at our acceleration in the time we've run. Boy, we've come up fast. Give us a little bit more time. Now look at the men's second tier heat. They're dead on. The women are not that much slower. And that's in a sprint. You want to go long distance. The longer your race is, the more women win it. You start going to a marathon, in the top 10, about 40%, if 40 to 60% of the top 10 finishers are women. You go ultras, the women are beating the men more often. So a lot of this also goes to our own bias about what we consider strength and athleticism. And it is very tilted because, sports were originally a man's thing. This is no fault on that. Originally, it was just men playing it. So our definition of good at sports is influenced by that. And we haven't, folks who are fans of both genders in any sport will often tell you, like, sure, take basketball. The men might be more athletic. You're going to see more dunks. But if you actually want to watch basketball, the women are better. And that's mostly true in most sports that, so what are you actually valuing? And I think even if you're looking at a lot of those strength components, I think it's so much closer than we realize. I think it's probably a 60-40, 60% of the women are probably better than 40% of the men, even in those categories, right? Because we're going by averages. Yes, the average man is bigger and taller and has more upper body strength than a woman, but that's averages, right? I know plenty of guys that are my size are smaller. And I've playing like pickup, for example, there's some times where, the other woman on the field is 6'4", and neither one of us can guard the other. Like, I cannot guard 6'4", but 6'4" can't keep up a little me. So I go match up on a guy that's somewhat my size, and she go matches up on a guy that's somewhat her size. We go for the better matchup. It has nothing to do with gender.
Yeah, and true athletes get that, I think, from the essence of, playing a sport and being a competitor, right? Like, we're not, that's not what it's about. But you bring up a lot of really good points that I think somebody needs to listen to this entire conversation to be able to start with, the understanding. What I think the biggest thing and takeaway that I want people to kind of get is, one, people are people, humans. People are people and humans. Like, let's just start there, right? Let's start with, like, okay, what does equality and equity really, really look like? And then a lot of people are trying to have conversations in spaces that they don't even reside.
Yeah.
Right. Like, let's just leave, like, you're not an athlete. You don't, there's that piece, right? You're just trying to throw something. And I really like what you said about, like, sexism just kind of readdressed. And how do we just get back to, like, how do we just protect people? Because there's enough stuff going on in the world. There's enough hurt, there's enough pain. And I think that we need to, as humans, just do a better job of making sure that when we're talking about equity, that we really have the ability to include, right? That inclusion, right? That diversity and inclusion, and not being exclusive in our equity and diversity conversation. But I definitely want to thank you for taking the time to sit with me and have this convo, and obviously wearing your, you know, equality shirt and speaking and being, I would say, an ally and a participant on, you know, on a lot of different sides. And you know what it's like to be, I would say, marginalized and suppressed, but also fight for those who are. So we thank you, and I stand with you, and I support you, and love you. And I look forward to continue to grow with these fights as you continue to, you know, do the same thing, because we all really just want, we all really want the same, right? Love is love. So I appreciate you. 828 fam, thank you for joining us. I hope that you share this conversation with anybody you feel like needs to hear it. And maybe listen back to it a couple times if you feel like
I do talk a lot, but yeah, thank you for having this conversation, right? As you can
Yeah.
see, I really enjoy this conversation. Like,
Yes. So if people want to reach out, definitely go to 828flow.com and you can find Roscoe's information there. If you want to learn how to play ultimate frisbee, definitely reach out to her there as well. But we appreciate you and the work that you do, and just the human that you are, and the energy that you bring to this world and this space. So 828, this is Critical Conversations for Crucial Growth. I hope that you grew some way today, and stay safe and know that you're loved. Peace.
Peace.